The 1860s saw the height of a controversy over a group of working women's distinctive form of dress. The Wigan pit lasses wore trousers. They wore socks rather than stockings, and often went without any socks at all. White might seem an unusual choice of colour for these hard-working women, but white cotton undergarments could be boiled clean, whereas dyed fabrics would quickly be bleached of any colour. Quite how conventional their undergarments were, however, is only a guess. It would have varied from person to person, but photographs suggest that many, though not all, still wore corsets to support their bust, and probably because they also offered abdominal and back support too. They wore a front buttoning blouse, or shirt, whose sleeves would be rolled up to the top of the arm for work. Much of the rest of their clothing was borrowed from the menfolk of their family, and was very worn and much patched. They wore wool trousers, patched with all possible material except the original one. Their footwear were hard-wearing, leather-topped wooden clogs with brass clasps. They often wore a man's waistcoat, and when the weather was cold they would add a man's jacket too. In a nod to convention, the pit lasses wore a skirt over their trousers. However, working at the pit head was dangerous, and the women reduced the risk of clothing getting caught around their feet or tangled in wagon wheels by folding the skirt safely out of the way, so that it was little more than an apron. The lasses could always quickly drop the skirt down to cover the trousers and appear more womanly, but apparently they never bothered. A neckerchief was worn around the neck, which served the practical purpose of stopping too much coal dust going down the neck, and a cloth to wipe their face and brow of sweat. They wore scarves to hold their hair back and to protect it from the coal dust, and they wore a padded bonnet over the top for additional protection. The 1842 Mines and Collieries Act banned women from underground working, so the women had found work at the pit head instead. Most of the women came from mining families, and many were the main breadwinners due to death or injury of a family member, usually husband or father, in a mining accident. However, the work they did, sorting and loading coal as it came up from the mine, and then pushing the wagons off down the rail tracks, was deemed too dangerous for women, and their jobs at the surface were also at risk. Further, their manner of dressing was deeply unsettling to Victorian sensibilities, and they regarded the pit girls as coarse and mannish, and there was a campaign to remove the women from surface labour. But the pit brow lasses had a champion in Arthur Munby, a Cambridge academic, barrister and diarist, who was fascinated by these independent and self-confident women. Much of what we know about the pit lasses comes from Munby's diaries, and they emerge from his pages as vibrant, witty, and in spite of all concerns, feminine. The notoriety of the pit lass dress attracted photographers. Small albums of photographs were sold to visitors as souvenirs. The women posed in groups or alone, in their working clothes, and with the tools of their trade, a large coal shovel and riddle, or carrying a drink flask and basket containing their needs for the day, perhaps their lunch and an extra layer of clothing. Munby reports that the pit women were robust and strong, and much healthier than their mill counterparts, who he described as sickly and sallow, and that most pit women actively enjoyed their work, finding being out in the fresh air preferable to being in a noisy mill with the air clogged with cotton fibres. The pit lasses even inspired novels, including one by Frances Burnett, the author of The Secret Garden, entitled That Lass of Lowry's, and dolls dressed as pit lasses were made. Some of the pit brow lasses even travelled to London to defend their right to work, speaking to the Home Secretary in person. And by 1887, the women had won the right to continue working at the colliery pit head.